Predators and People, Why Trust is Extended to Their Young Part 1. The Discovery. The screaming started at 0347 hours, ship time. Captain Zexhai of the Dominion research vessel Silent Claw jerked awake in her pod, her forearms immediately reaching for the emergency controls. The sound that pierced through the ship's hull wasn't mechanical failure. It was organic, alive, and it was coming from the specimen bay. "Report!" she barked into her comm as she raced through the corridors, her clawed feet clicking against the metal grating. "Captain, it's the human younglings," came the trembling voice of Science Officer Krell. They've changed." Zexhai burst into the observation deck overlooking the specimen bay and froze. Below, in what had been a sterile containment area holding 12 human children, the remnants of a destroyed colony ship, chaos reigned. But this wasn't the chaos of fear or panic. This was the chaos of war. The children, ranging from what humans, called 6 to 16 years old, had somehow breached their individual cells. They moved with a coordination that made Zexahai's predator instincts scream warnings. The youngest ones, barely knee-high to an adult Kethrani, were systematically dismantling security cameras with tools fashioned from their meal containers. The older ones had formed a defensive perimeter around something in the center of the room. "How long has this been happening?" Zexhai demanded. 17 minutes, Captain. They've disabled 40% of our surveillance and... The lights went out. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and in that crimson glow, Zexhai saw something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The human children weren't just escaping. They were hunting. The oldest male, barely into what humans called adolescence, looked directly up at the observation window. His eyes reflected the red light like a nocturnal predator's, and his lips pulled back to reveal small white teeth in what humans called a smile. But on a human child's face, surrounded by the calculated violence they had just witnessed, it looked like the expression of a creature that had tasted blood and wanted more. "Captain," whispered Krell, his voice barely audible. "The door seals to the specimen bay. They're not just damaged. They've been systematically weakened from the inside. This wasn't random destruction. This was planned." Zexhai felt her blood chill. The Dominion had been studying humans for 3 cycles, ever since they'd discovered the species on the outer rim. They were considered primitive, barely spacefaring, and utterly harmless. Their adults showed typical herd species behavior, protective of their young, predictably emotional, and easily broken when separated from their offspring. But these weren't adults. "Sir," came another voice over the comm. "Lieutenant Vash from security. We have a problem. The human younglings, they've sent us a message." "What kind of message?" There was a pause. "They've written something on the wall of their containment area. In their own blood, Captain. It says, 'We know you took our parents. We want them back. You have 12 hours. Zexhai's 4 hearts hammered in her chest. Below in the bay, the children had gone silent, but she could feel them watching, waiting. "Captain," Krell's voice was barely a whisper now. "There's something else. According to our files, the youngest of these specimens is only 6 human years old. But the molecular analysis of the door seals, the precision required to weaken them without triggering alarms. It would take the engineering knowledge of a graduate-level technician." In the red-lit darkness below, the human children began to move again, and Zexhai realized with growing horror that everything the Dominion thought they knew about humanity was wrong. Dead wrong. The ship's corridors had never felt so much like a maze. Lieutenant Vash pressed his back against the wall, his weapon drawn but trembling in his grip. Behind him, 2 of his security team lay unconscious. Not dead, he'd checked, but taken down with a precision that defied explanation. The human younglings had been out of containment for exactly 43 minutes, and they'd already made Vash question everything he thought he knew about warfare. "Control, this is Vash," he whispered into his comm. "I need backup to Section 7. The humans, they're not acting like children." Captain Zexhai's voice crackled back, tight with stress. "Define not acting like children, Lieutenant." Vash watched his motion scanner, but it showed nothing. The humans were either perfectly still or somehow masking their movements. "They're using military tactics, sir. Small unit coordination. They disabled Security Officer Thek with what looked like a standard nerve pinch, but applied with surgical precision. A 6-year-old human shouldn't know pressure points that can drop a full-grown Kethrani. A soft sound echoed down the corridor. A human child humming a lullaby. The melody was sweet, innocent, and absolutely terrifying in the context of a ship under siege by 12 escaped specimens. "Captain," Vash continued, his voice dropping even lower, "I think we need to consider the possibility that we don't understand human development at all." In the command center, Zexhai was reaching the same conclusion. Science Officer Krell had pulled up every file they had on human biology, and none of it made sense anymore. "Look at this," Krell said, his manipulator. Appendages dancing across the holographic displays. Human brain development. We assumed their younglings were like ours. Limited cognitive function, dependent on adults for survival. But these scans, he highlighted a series of neural pathway maps. Human children's brains aren't smaller versions of adult brains. They're completely different architectures. Different how? Their learning capacity is exponentially higher. Their pattern recognition is off our scales. And their social bonding. Krell paused, his face going pale. "Captain, when human children form groups, they don't just cooperate. They create collective intelligence networks. Each child becomes part of a larger thinking organism." The humming in the corridors stopped. Then over the ship's communication system came a voice. Young, maybe 10 human years old, speaking perfect Kethrani with an accent that suggested advanced linguistic training. "Captain Zexhai, this is Maya Chen, representing the Earth children aboard your vessel. We wish to negotiate." Zexhai exchanged glances with Krell. "This is Captain Zexhai. How did you access our communications?" "The same way we accessed your educational databases, your tactical manuals, and your ship schematics," Maya replied. "We've had nothing to do for 3 months except learn." "Did you think we were just sitting in those cells crying?" The display, screens around the command center flickered, then filled with images, the human children in their cells, but not cowering or grieving as the Kethrani had assumed. Instead, they were watching, studying, memorizing every detail of their captors' routines, technology, and behavior. "You've been observing us," Zexhai said. "We've been preparing," Maya corrected. "Your people took our parents. They took our teachers, our protectors, our entire world. Did you really think human children would just accept that?" Another voice joined the first, younger, maybe 7 years old, but speaking with the cold precision of a military strategist. "We know about the other ships, Captain. The ones carrying the adult humans. We know about the Dominion's slave markets. We know what you plan to do with our families." Vash's voice came through on a priority channel. "Captain, they've taken engineering. The children have somehow locked us out of primary ship functions. And Captain, they're not trying to escape anymore." "What do you mean?" "They're trying to take control of the entire ship." In the silence that followed, the truth began to dawn. On Zexhai, the Dominion hadn't captured a dozen helpless human children. They had captured 12 members of a species whose young were engineered by evolution to be the ultimate survivors. Creative, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when their families were threatened. The real war was just beginning. "Tell me about human schools," Captain Zexhai said into the comm, her voice carefully controlled. She was speaking to Maya Chen, the apparent leader of the human children, through the ship's internal communication system. For the past 6 hours, the children had systematically taken control of every major ship function except life support, which they had left untouched, Zexhai noted with growing unease. "Why do you want to know about schools?" Maya's voice was polite, curious, and completely at odds with the fact that she and 11 other children had effectively captured a Dominion research vessel. "Because I'm trying to understand how 12 younglings learned to disable military-grade security systems." A different voice responded. Tommy, age 8 according to their files. "Oh, that wasn't from school. That was from video games." Zexhai felt her 4 hearts skip beats. "Video games?" "Yeah," came another voice. Sarah, age 12. "On Earth, we have these simulations where you have to solve puzzles, break codes, and escape from impossible situations. They're really popular with kids. Some of them are based on real historical events, like prison escapes and resistance movements." Science Officer Krell, monitoring the conversation, pulled up files on human entertainment media. His face went through several shades of pale as he scrolled through the data. "Captain," he whispered, "they're children's entertainment. It's training programs. Look at this. Escape the Castle. A game where players must analyze medieval security systems and exploit weaknesses. Codebreaker Academy. Children as young as 5 learn cryptography and electronic countermeasures. Underground Railroad Simulator." "Captain Zexhai?" Maya's voice interrupted. "Can we continue our conversation? We have a proposition." "I'm listening. We want to make a deal. But first, you need to understand something about human children that your species apparently missed." The main display screen in the command center flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a documentary presentation. The human children had somehow accessed the ship's educational systems and created their own briefing. Maya's voice narrated as images filled the screen. For 300,000 years, human children survived in environments that would kill most adult aliens. We lived through ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. Our brains developed to be incredibly adaptable because the world kept changing, and only the children who could learn fast and think creatively lived long enough to become adults. The images shifted to show human children throughout history. Cave paintings created by young hands, teenage inventors and scientists, child prodigies in mathematics and engineering. "Your species raises its young in safe, controlled environments," Tommy's voice added. "Human children grow up expecting danger. We're taught from the moment we can walk that the world might try to kill us, and we need to be ready." Sarah continued the presentation. "Every human child learns basic chemistry from cooking, engineering from building toys, electronics from fixing broken devices, strategic thinking from games, social manipulation from playground politics. By the time we're teenagers, we've had more practical problem-solving experience than most alien adults." The presentation shifted to show the children's time in captivity, but from their perspective. They hadn't been suffering in silence. They had been conducting reconnaissance, learning Kethrani language and technology, mapping the ship's systems, and planning their escape with the patience of professional intelligence operatives. "The reason you didn't detect our preparations," Maya said, "is that you were looking for adult patterns of behavior. But human children don't act like small adults. We act like an entirely different species, one that's been optimized by evolution to survive when the adults are gone." Lieutenant Vash's voice came through on emergency frequency. "Captain, we have a new problem. Long-range sensors are picking up 3 Dominion military vessels approaching our position. ETA, 47 minutes. Maya's voice turned cold. "We know about the military ships, Captain. We've been monitoring your communications for hours. Those ships are coming to transport us to the slave markets, aren't they?" Zexhai didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Here's our proposition," Maya continued. "You help us rescue our parents and the other human captives from the transport ships, and we'll help you survive what's coming next." "What do you mean, what's coming next?" For the first time since the crisis began, Maya's voice carried a hint of emotion. Not fear, but something far more dangerous. "Captain, did you really think the humans on Earth didn't notice when an entire colony ship disappeared? Did you think they wouldn't come looking?" The display screen shifted one final time, showing long-range sensor data that the children had somehow accessed. In the deep space beyond the approaching Dominion fleet, something massive was emerging from hyperspace. Something that made the Dominion warships look like toys. "The Earth fleet arrives in 18 hours, Maya said quietly. "And Captain, they're not coming to negotiate." The first Dominion military vessel, Iron Talon, docked with the research ship exactly on schedule. Captain Zexhai watched from the command center as boarding parties prepared to transfer the human specimens to the slave markets of the inner systems. What they found instead was a reception committee of 1. Maya Chen, all of 12 years old, stood alone in the main docking bay. She wore a makeshift uniform created from ship's materials, and her small hands were clasped behind her back in a posture that somehow managed to look both military and diplomatic. "I am Maya Chen, acting representative of the Sol Colonial Fleet," she announced to the boarding party. "I'm here to discuss terms." The Kethrani soldiers exchanged bewildered glances. The squad leader, a battle-scarred veteran named Gorth, activated his comm. "Command, we have A situation. The human younglings have sent a negotiator. From the Iron Talon's bridge, Captain Vextar's voice crackled back. A negotiator? It's a child. Bring it aboard for processing. Sir, Gorth said carefully. Respectfully, I don't think that's advisable. Why not, soldier? Gorth was staring at Maya, and what he saw in her eyes made his warrior instincts scream warnings. Because, sir, I don't think it's actually a child. Maya smiled, the same predatory expression that had chilled Zexhai days earlier. Squad Leader Gorth, I believe? Your military record is impressive. 43 successful boarding actions. Decorated veteran of the Rigel campaign. You have excellent tactical instincts. Gorth's grip tightened on his weapon. How do you know my service record? The same way I know that Captain Vextar has a gambling problem, that his ship's weapon systems have a 40-second reload cycle, and that his crew morale is at an all-time low because he hasn't paid them in 3 months. Maya's voice remained pleasant, conversational. I know because for the past 8 hours, we've been inside your ship's computer systems. On the bridge of the Iron Talon, every display screen suddenly flickered and went dark. When they came back online, they showed a single message repeated, across every surface. Hello, Captain Vextar. We need to talk. Sir, his communications officer reported, voice shaking. We've been completely compromised. They have access to everything, navigation, weapons, life support, crew records, even personal files. Captain Vextar activated his comm to the boarding party. Gorth, bring that thing to me, now! But Maya was already walking toward the Iron Talon's boarding ramp. That won't be necessary, Captain. I'm coming to you. 20 minutes later, she sat across from 3 of the most feared military commanders in the Dominion fleet, looking like a child at a school meeting, except for her eyes. Her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had already won the war and was simply explaining the terms of surrender. Gentlemen, she began, let me explain your situation. In 14 hours, the Earth fleet will arrive in this system. It consists of 43 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts that your intelligence services have never seen before. They are not coming to rescue us, Captain Vextar leaned forward. Then why are they coming? They're coming to demonstrate what happens when someone takes human children. She gestured, and the display screens around the conference room lit up, with tactical data that should have been impossible for her to access. Your fleet consists of 3 ships, respectable firepower for dealing with primitives, but utterly inadequate for what's heading toward you. You have 2 choices, fight and die, or help us and live. Help you do what? Demanded Captain Nexroll. From the Blood Fang. Rescue our parents and the other human captives from the transport ships. All 847 of them. The 3 Kethrani captains exchanged glances. That's impossible, Vextar said. The transport ships are heavily defended and already in hyperspace heading for the core worlds. Maya's smile widened. Captain, you're thinking like an adult. Human children don't accept impossible. She stood and walked to the tactical display, her small hands dancing across controls that should have required Kethrani physiology to operate. The display shifted to show hyperspace tracking data. Tommy, he's 8, has been working on hyperspace mathematics since we were captured. Turns out human children's brains are exceptionally good with multidimensional calculations. Sarah figured out how to hack your hyperspace communication networks, and the Martinez twins have been mapping every Dominion facility within 50 light-years. The display now showed a real-time map of Dominion fleet movements, facility locations, and shipping schedules. Information that represented centuries of military intelligence, laid out as clearly as a school presentation. We know where our parents are, when they'll arrive at their destination, and exactly how many ships are guarding them. We also know that if you help us rescue them, the Earth fleet might be willing to let you live long enough to explain to your government why attacking human colonies was the worst mistake in Dominion history. Captain Vextar stared at the tactical display, then at the human child who had just demonstrated intelligence capabilities that surpassed his entire command structure. What exactly are you proposing? Maya's expression became deadly serious. We're proposing to teach you the most important lesson in human child development, Captain. When you threaten our families, we don't just grow up fast. She paused, and in that moment, Vextar saw not a 12-year-old girl, but something far more dangerous. A human child who had decided that diplomacy was over. We grow up dangerous. The transport ship Cargo Master was supposed to be a routine run to the slave markets of Kepler Prime. Captain Dexmore had made this journey hundreds of times, hauling various species to their new lives as property of the Dominion elite. The human cargo was particularly valuable. Intelligent enough for complex tasks, but supposedly docile enough to manage. He was reviewing the manifest when his communications officer interrupted. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's strange." Define strange. "It appears to be coming from inside our own cargo bay." Dexmore felt his blood chill. "That's impossible. The cargo holds are isolated systems. No communication equipment. The transmission came through anyway, and the voice that filled the bridge made every Kethrani present question their understanding of reality. It was a human child, maybe 10 years old, speaking perfect Kethrani with the authority of a fleet admiral. "Captain Dexmore, this is Emma Rodriguez, representing the human cargo aboard your vessel. We have a few concerns about our travel arrangements." Dexmore activated his comm. "How are you accessing ship communications?" "The same way we accessed your crew schedules, cargo manifests, and maintenance records," Emma replied cheerfully. "Captain, did you know that your ship hasn't had proper maintenance in 14 months? Your hyperspace motivator is running at 78% efficiency, and your life support systems have multiple critical failures waiting to happen." The engineering station lit up with alerts as systems throughout the ship began reporting problems that had somehow gone undetected for months. "What do you want?" Dexmore demanded. "We want to go home," Emma said simply. "But since that's not currently an option, we'd like to discuss the conditions of our confinement." On the display screen, security footage from the cargo holds appeared, but instead of showing broken, defeated prisoners, it showed something that made Dexmore's predator instincts scream warnings. The human adults and children had organized themselves into what looked like a small city. They had somehow bypassed the isolation barriers between cargo holds and created a complex social structure. Adults were teaching children, sharing resources, and maintaining morale. But it was the children who drew Dexmore's attention. Human children as young as 6 were standing guard, running communication networks, and coordinating activities with the precision of military personnel. Teenagers were leading work groups that had somehow improved the basic life support systems in their holding areas. And through it all, they were learning. "Captain," Emma continued, "we've had 3 weeks to study your ship, your crew, and your standard operating procedures. We've identified 47 different ways to disable this vessel without harming anyone. We've also figured out how to contact other human ships, how to access Dominion military communications, and how to crash your hyperspace navigation system." Dexmore's first officer, Lieutenant Kex, leaned close to whisper. "Sir, if they can do all that, why haven't they escaped?" Emma's voice answered before Dexmore could ask. "Because we're not trying to escape, Lieutenant Kex. We're waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For our children to come get us." The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data. In the deep space, behind the transport ship, hyperspace wakes were appearing. Dozens of them. Ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, moving with purpose and deadly precision. "The Sol Colonial Fleet isn't just coming to rescue us," Emma explained, her young voice carrying a weight that made veteran warriors uncomfortable. "They're coming to send a message. Every species in the galaxy needs to understand that humans protect their young, and when you take human children, you face the consequences." Captain Dexmore stared at the sensor readings. The Earth ships were closing fast, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in Dominion intelligence files. "What kind of consequences?" he asked. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any battle cry. "Captain, what do you think happens to a species that spends 300,000 years teaching its children to survive in a hostile universe? What do you think we become when someone threatens our families?" The first Earth warship dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the transport convoy. It was massive, sleek, and moving with the fluid grace of a predator that had found its prey. Warning shots blazed across the cargo master's bow. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Colonial Defense Fleet," came a transmission. The voice was older than Emma's, but carried the same steel. "You are carrying stolen human cargo, including my daughter. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate why taking human children was the last mistake your species will ever make. Dexmore looked at his tactical display. 3 transport ships against 40-plus Earth warships. The mathematics were simple, even if the implications were terrifying. Captain, Emma's voice came through the comm one last time. I should mention that Admiral Chen is my mother, and she's been very worried about me. In the cargo hold, the human children began to sing. It was a lullaby, sweet and innocent, carried through the ship's communication system. But in the context of an overwhelming military defeat, it sounded like a funeral dirge for the Dominion's belief that humans were harmless. The last thing Captain Dexmore heard before his ship was boarded was the sound of human children laughing, the laughter of predators who had finally cornered their prey. The Dominion High Council had convened an emergency session exactly once before in their 2,000-year history. That was during the Great Plague of Sector 7, when a biological weapon had threatened to wipe out half their population. This was worse. Supreme Counselor Thexran stood before the assembled leaders of 43 worlds, his forearms trembling as he read the intelligence reports. Around the circular chamber, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species sat in stunned silence. The human fleet has destroyed 17 Dominion facilities in the past 72 hours, Thexran announced. They have liberated over 40,000 human captives and approximately 150,000 individuals from other species. But that's not the most concerning development. The holographic display in the center of the chamber lit up, showing tactical footage from the recent battles. The Dominion forces watching the recordings saw their supposedly superior technology being systematically dismantled by ships that shouldn't have existed. How is this possible? Demanded Counselor Vexhai from the Rigel sector. Our intelligence reports indicated that humans had barely achieved interstellar flight. These ships are using technology we don't recognize. General Korth, the Dominion's supreme military commander, stepped forward. His scarred face looked like he'd aged decades in the past week. Counselors, we made a fundamental error in our assessment of human capabilities. We assumed that a species' children would be representative of their weakest members. And they're not? They're the exact opposite. Korth activated the tactical displays, showing battle footage that made seasoned warriors flinch. Human children don't just learn faster than adults, they think differently. While we were studying their captured adults and determining them to be primitive, their children were analyzing our technology, learning our languages, and developing countermeasures. The display showed security footage from the research vessels. Human children as young as 6 years old dismantling Dominion security systems with tools made from food containers. The human adults we captured were peaceful colonists, Korth continued. Teachers, farmers, engineers, people who had chosen quiet lives on frontier worlds. But their children. He paused, struggling with the implications. Their children are what happens when a species survives by making every generation more adaptable than the last. Counselor Dexhai from the core worlds leaned forward. Surely you're exaggerating. They're still just children. The display shifted to show a recording from Admiral Chen's flagship as it approached a Dominion military installation. The communication was audio only, but the voice that came through the speakers made the entire High Council go silent. Dominion Facility Outpost 7. This is Maya Chen aboard the Earth vessel Determination. I am 12 years old, and I am here to negotiate the surrender of your installation. The Dominion commander's response was predictably dismissive. Child, you are speaking to a military facility defended by 10,000 troops and orbital defense platforms. Withdraw immediately. Sir, Maya's voice replied with the patience of someone explaining something to a particularly slow student. I have 43 ships, superior technology, and something you don't have. Which is? Really angry parents. The display showed what happened next. The Earth Fleet's demonstration of their weapons capabilities. A single shot from the flagship's main gun vaporized an unmanned asteroid the size of a small moon. The message was clear. Surrender or face complete annihilation. The installation surrendered without a shot being fired, General Korth reported. They freed 12,000 slaves and provided intelligence on 17 other Dominion facilities. This pattern has been repeated across our entire border region. Supreme Counselor Thexran addressed the chamber. What are our options? We have 3 choices, Korth replied grimly. Fight and face extinction. Negotiate and accept whatever terms they offer. Or, he paused, his voice dropping. Find out what they want and give it to them before they decide we're too dangerous to leave alive. The chamber's communication system activated, and a new voice filled the space. Young, clear, and speaking perfect Dominion standard. Honorable counselors, this is Maya Chen. I'm broadcasting from the Earth fleet currently positioned at the edge of your home system. We'd like to discuss terms. Panic erupted in the chamber. If the human fleet had reached the Dominion core worlds, without detection, it meant their military technology was even more advanced than feared. How did you bypass our defense networks? Thexren demanded. The same way we bypassed everything else, Maya replied. We asked our parents to teach us. Counselors, human adults might choose peace, but human children study war as a survival skill. We've spent the past month learning everything about your civilization, your military, and your weaknesses. What do you want? We want to go home, Maya said simply. All of us. Every human you've taken. Every slave you've captured from every species. We want reparations for the damage you've done. And we want a guarantee that this never happens again. And if we refuse? For the first time, Maya's voice carried the cold finality of someone who had moved beyond negotiation. Then you'll discover why every human child learns about the concept of mutually assured destruction before they learn to drive. The display screens around the chamber lit up with tactical data, showing the true scope of the Earth fleet. Hundreds of ships, weapons systems that defied known physics, and most terrifyingly, crews that included human children working alongside their parents with the efficiency of a military that had been planning this war for generations. Counselors, Maya continued, humans have a saying. It takes a village to raise a child. What we didn't mention is that when you threaten our children, the entire village comes to war. In the silence that followed, the Dominion High Council finally understood the truth about humanity. They hadn't captured a few thousand primitives from a backwater species. They had declared war on a civilization that treated the protection of children as the highest law of existence. And they were about to learn what that meant. 3 months after the Dominion's surrender, Maya Chen stood in the observation deck of the Earth vessel New Hope, watching the last transport ships depart from Kepler Prime. Below, thousands of humans, adults and children who had been destined for slavery, were boarding vessels that would take them home. Admiral Sarah Chen, Maya's mother, joined her at the viewing port. For the first time in months, the woman who had led humanity's most successful military campaign looked like what she really was. A mother who had been terrified of losing her child. How do you feel? Admiral Chen asked. Maya considered the question seriously. At 12 years old, she had negotiated the surrender of a galactic empire, helped redesign Earth's military strategy, and become the unofficial spokesperson for a new era of human expansion into space. But right now, she felt like a kid who just wanted to go home. Tired, she said honestly, and hungry. I really want Mom's cooking. Admiral Chen smiled. Not the cold smile of a fleet commander, but the warm expression of a mother. I think that can be arranged. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the ships depart. Finally, Maya spoke again. Do you think they understand now? The aliens, I mean. Understand what? Why we're different. Why taking our children was such a mistake. Admiral Chen looked at her daughter, this remarkable child who had helped bring down a 2,000-year-old empire through the simple application of human ingenuity and determination. I think they're beginning to, she said. But Maya, I need you to understand something. What we did, it wasn't just about rescuing captured humans. It was about sending a message to every species in the galaxy. What kind of message? That humans are no longer just another primitive species struggling to survive on the galactic frontier. We're a force to be reckoned with. And the reason we're dangerous isn't our technology or our weapons. Maya looked up at her mother. Then, what is it? It's our children. Every human child is raised with the knowledge that they might someday need to save their family, their community, their entire species. We don't just teach you math and science and history. We teach you to think, to adapt, to survive, and to fight for what matters. The communication system activated, and Tommy's voice filled the observation deck. Maya, we're getting reports from Earth. The news services want to interview us about the war. Tell them we're not war heroes, Maya replied. We're just kids who wanted our families back. But even as she said it, Maya knew it wasn't entirely true. Human children were something the galaxy had never encountered before. Young minds shaped by a species that had learned to survive by making every generation stronger, smarter, and more adaptable than the last. Admiral Chen activated her own comm system, broadcasting to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We're going home. As the Earth vessels began their journey back to human space, Maya thought about the future. The Dominion had agreed to release all human captives and pay substantial reparations. More importantly, they had agreed to spread the word throughout the galaxy. Humans were under the protection of their children, and their children were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Mom, Maya said, what happens now? When we get home, I mean. Now you go back to being a kid. You go to school, you play with your friends, you complain about homework. But what if someone else tries to take humans captive? What if another alien empire decides we look like easy targets? Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Dominion learned, that human children aren't just our future, they're our promise. What kind of promise? The promise that no matter how far we travel, no matter how many enemies we face, no matter how impossible the odds might seem, humans will never stop fighting for their families. And every human child carries that promise forward. As the New Hope entered hyperspace, carrying Maya and the other children toward home, a message was already spreading throughout the galaxy. It traveled from species to species, world to world, carried by traders and diplomats and refugees who had witnessed humanity's first war. The message was simple. Humans were no longer just another species struggling to survive in a dangerous universe. They were a civilization that had turned the protection of their young into an art form, and their children had become the galaxy's most effective deterrent against aggression. In the years that followed, xenobiologists would study human child development with a mixture of fascination and terror. They would discover that human children weren't just learning. They were being prepared for a universe that might someday demand everything of them. Every game was a lesson in strategy. Every story was a tutorial in survival. Every challenge was training for the day they might need to save their world. But Maya Chen, now 13, and sitting in her childhood bedroom on Earth, surrounded by homework and normal teenage concerns, understood the real truth. Human children weren't weapons or soldiers or strategic assets. They were simply children who had been raised with an unshakable belief that family was worth fighting for, that freedom was worth defending, and that sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. As she looked out her window at the stars, Maya smiled. Somewhere out there, alien species were telling their young ones bedtime stories about the human children who had brought down an empire. And somewhere else, human children were being tucked into bed by parents who knew that their kids were growing up in a universe that would never again make the mistake of underestimating them. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Human children were not prey. They were predators who chose to be protectors. And that made all the difference.